Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Mind Management Mentors podcast. As I start all my podcasts, I will pretty much say if it's in the mind, it can be managed. And there is so much in the mind. We have to start looking at different ways to be able to get where we want in life by looking at the subconscious mind, the unconscious mind, the biases that we have, and how we can heal and move and go on the journey of life, which is not always simple and fun, can have resistance and can give us so much pain, but at the same time, give us so much joy. And that's what today's podcast is going to be about. We've got an amazing guest on. I am not going to introduce you. I'm going to let you introduce yourself. Say hi, Chris. What do you do and where are you from?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I am a spiritual counselor and I currently live in Southern California.
Wow. Look at we're getting guests from all over the world. Whereabouts in Southern California?
San Diego.
Oh, San Diego Chargers.
Yes, I guess it would be. I'm not originally from here, so I'm an East Coast girl, so uh, true to roots.
No, actually, also East Coast never eat shredded wheat would be New York.
That's it.
Nice. But
Yeah.
we chatted before the podcast started, and it always incites so many questions. And for everyone tuning in, I think questions are good. We can often not ask enough questions sometimes. And we're going to be talking about trauma. We're going to be talking about healing. We're going to be talking about spirituality in today. And Chris, you are going to be definitely leading. And I'm going to be asking questions as someone who is aware but doesn't know sometimes. And I think that's going to be a powerful part of this podcast. Whereas a lot with my guests in the past, I'm like, I've got quite a good knowledge on it. But I've got a feeling, Chris, you're going to lead this one today.
Love it. I'm happy to.
So, as a spiritual counselor, what does that mean?
Well, for me, it is really about holding space for somebody in order to open up in a way that is, I would say, a wider scope than general counseling would be because, for one, I am not a licensed therapist or counselor. I feel like I should throw out that disclaimer. So, there is a certain kind of box you need to be in when you are credentialed and certified and whatnot. And this doesn't make me necessarily better or worse, but an alternative because for me, especially because of the way I work with clients, I often will work with people that have said that therapy either didn't work for them or only works so much and they're just looking to go beyond, right? And I'm looking at a bigger picture or a different picture, if you will.
That's amazing, Chris. So, how were you drawn to spiritual counseling for yourself? I always think when I'm talking to guests, when I'm having the chat, there's always a tipping point. There's something that we've gone through in life that we've gone through probably the normal route to go through therapy or maybe counseling, and it hasn't worked. And I would agree with you on that one because a lot of my clients have gone through that process as well. When they come to a mind management coach, it's got all these skills. It's like, oh, well, therapy didn't work or counseling, I didn't get the results. And sometimes they just weren't ready. But for your journey to where you are, and I think you make a really good point there that you're not a therapist. And I say that to my clients, look, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a counselor. These are the skills that I have that can help. What was your journey into your spiritual counseling? Because you must have gone through something. I know we've chatted, but what was your journey into finding this worked for you? So you want to share that to the world. What was your tipping point, or what's the? I like superheroes, so I'm going to ask you, what was your origin story?
It was a challenging one. I had a rather traumatic childhood, and when someone has a traumatic childhood, it becomes their normal. So they wouldn't necessarily identify it as trauma. And when I hit a point in my life where I just said, enough, I'm done, I'm not doing this anymore. And it was terrifying. And so my first steps for myself was to cut off my parents. And it really was, that was the catalyst for my life change. I didn't know that. I just wanted to protect my family, protect my children. And So I just took those little steps in the beginning. I sought therapy for myself. I just started doing things for myself. I'm also the kind of person that wants to heal yesterday. So I was just doing everything I possibly could, whatever seemed like it could work. You could have told me I stand on your head and you're going to feel better. I'd be like, great, I'll try it. I
Yeah.
was just doing everything I could. And over time, it opened me up to spirit. I would start seeing people in my mind's eye, and I had not done that before, so it was a little surprising. And while that's not primarily what I do, it started shifting me, like I said, to my own healing journey. It opened me to spirituality, but I've always had this ability to help others. When people come to me and talk to me, I mean, I often even, before my whole spiritual awakening, people would say, "Oh, you should be a therapist. You should go into counseling. You're so good at helping people." And I never felt drawn to that personally. I was in business. I have a business background. I enjoyed that. But as far as now helping people on this wider scope where I really can see their energy, I can see things in them and help make them aware, because oftentimes awareness is one of the first steps to healing
Yeah.
and giving people those aha moments to help them move forward.
Was there a tipping point for your aha moment that you and I know that I just spoke to somebody else recently about, the different states and stages of clairvoyancy. And it sounds like that you do have the visual kind of when you've opened the mind's eye. And I think for anybody who's listening, maybe say, "Oh, I didn't see the last podcast and other posts." What started happening when you felt? Because I think you're missing it feels like you're missing a chunk of a story. There's more to you than that, Chris. To be fair, we only met 5 minutes ago. There's more to you than what you're saying, and if we can, bearing in mind we've only known each other 5 minutes, check
Mhm.
me or you can check me order if you wish. I'm very open and clean on that one. So, what was? We didn't just wake up one morning with the mind's eye opened and go, "Oh, I can start seeing things that other people can't see."
True.
Was the
Uh,
journey? What was because awakening is scary.
yes.
I've had glimpses. I'm not saying I've had a full, but I know when for my own meditation experiences when I'm like, oh my God, I went somewhere else. That I was sat at the side of myself and I saw myself, and that's just from meditation. So, Chris, if I may, can we go deeper?
We can go deeper. It's more of a lot of things happen to me in these bits and pieces, right? And, when I look at it in hindsight, it makes sense. But as I was going through it, it just felt like this, I don't know, mishmash of things happening. So, like one of the things, for example, that was happening is my maternal grandfather was coming to me in spirit. So I couldn't see him, I couldn't hear him, but I felt him. And this was someone I didn't know in life, so it was a little easier for me to understand him beyond that, because oftentimes when we know people in life, we have these, yeah, we're conditioned and to understand who they are and we recognize their energy. So we kind of get in our own way. Is that him, or am I just imagining it's him? So I was really able to feel who this person was and get to know him. So it was interesting that here I cut off family and then I started receiving family in spirit, but I kind of ignored it because, there's this element of you feel a little crazy. You don't really think anyone's going to believe you. So I kind of kept it to myself for quite some time. I shared with my sister only because she had met him in life and remembered him enough where I would say, "Hey, this is what I'm feeling." And she'd be like, "Yes, that's absolutely him." And oh, how crazy. And she was excited about it. I was excited about it. So but I didn't look at it as an awakening. I didn't look at it as even part of my healing journey. I think at the time just looked at it as it was this time period and oh, how fun. And let's just see how long it lasts. I really didn't have any kind of foresight on it.
Thank you. That's lovely, Chris. I it's funny because when you mention your granddad, I always, especially when it comes to spirituality and in the UK, or it might be all over the world, but we have robin redbreasts. So there's a myth that with robbing redbreasts, it's a relative coming back to see you. It's a myth. It's something that was created. So, and it's really strange. And I'll say strange, and I'll even say strange here as a back a minute because I'm talking about this. Every time I see a robin redbreast, I think about my grandma. And I asked them, my grandma must be popping up for some unknown reason. You actually might be able to help me on this one, Chris, to be fair. This is not the way that we thought the pod was going to go. I'm actually looking at my grandma in a picture now, and I'm like, wow, completely in my subconscious. My grandma's there smiling at me. I did the psychic reading the other day with a lady. She's like, oh, I can talk to your grandma for you, not a problem. Wow, so it's all my grandma popping up at this moment in time. It's all my grandma, especially when I'm talking to spiritual counselors and of the psychic medium nature. Wow, it's always my grandma. You might be able to explain why later, Chris, in all fairness. So when you are, do you feel what was the meaning, or was it explained to you the meaning of why you did suddenly start feeling your granddad that you'd never met before?
I feel for him, he was more there to let me know what I can do. Because I think honestly, I needed someone not from this plane to expose me to that
Yeah,
because I had plenty of people over time tell me I could do this work. Um, and I would just kind of be like, okay, thanks. But at most, I would have called myself an intuitive empath. I could read people very easily. I could understand their energy. But when any of us have any kind of gifts, we don't necessarily see them as gifts when it's something we've done all our lives. So I didn't really look at it like it was in any way special or any way I could do. And it was very muted because of all my trauma. I was so I really just saw it as just, yeah, sure, I can understand people. But this was also because I lived in an environment where I really had to adapt to reading somebody's mood and energy for safety. Right. So to understand, like, I need to make sure I don't get hit today. So let me make sure, is he in a good mood? Is he going to be okay? Do I need to be in a different room? Those kinds of things. So, while one of my adaptation styles essentially helped in my psychic ability because I am incredibly intuitive. I can read a mood. When you have had to read somebody's mood for your entire childhood, you get really good at understanding people and emotions.
that makes total sense. That genuinely, it's like we've started processing a skill that's going to keep us alive. As it,
Exactly.
yeah, the skill that you've learned as a child is to read mood and emotion and avoid, which is a fight or flight response, absolutely.
Exactly.
But what it sounds like, please correct me wrong, is that trauma response or that traumatic response has now become this highly finely tuned skill that you now use. But that's pretty amazing. Again, we are literal strangers on this one.
Yeah.
But as I'm hearing that story, I'm like, wow, how I always come from everything has a positive intention. We might not see the positive in the moment, we might not feel the positive in the moment, but that is a big for Chris to walk around now going, that's a great way to look back and say thank you because look at what I have now and look at the things I am. That's amazing. Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you so much. So there is an element of when it comes to healing, how would you help others heal or go through that process?
I believe a good initial step is understanding your own trauma response.
Yeah,
Fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. When you
yeah,
understand your trauma response, you understand how you're conditioned. Because what a lot of people I feel struggle to do is see why they have created a pattern in their lives, why they have similar relationships, and they don't understand why they have similar instances at work, and they don't understand why these are all patterns. And these patterns almost always will go back to whatever your trauma response is.
yeah,
And when you recognize that, then you start to unpack it more and you start to be able to see how your body is physiologically reacting to situations because your nervous system is hardwired to.
yeah,
And so then you start to become aware of these things and it kind of gives you this aha, like, okay, I get why I do this. This makes perfect sense. So now, how do I stop doing that? How do I step out of this pattern? And it's really, you have to reprogram your nervous system. First, you should calm it down so you're not triggered into a trauma response and recognize it. I think our trauma responses are always going to be triggered in some way, shape, or form. You don't suddenly just not feel it,
Yeah.
but you're able to have pause. You get that and you're ready for it, but you have pause like, okay, I don't need to do that. I'm safe. I don't need to respond this way. But that's part of the the rewiring,
Yeah.
really. You are now having a different response, but you have to train yourself to do that.
Yeah, that's it's fascinating. And it's funny because you mentioned alternative. Do we do I can only speak for us in the UK, and I suppose when we go into the counseling, the therapy or the coaching or the healing business, you probably do start surrounding yourself with more of those people in that genre. So it does feel like in the UK there's a big shift towards alternative. I think there is that openness towards alternative, whether that would be NLP, life coaching, alternative, EMDR, brain spotting, somatic healing. Breath work's really powerful for us in the UK at the moment. I know I do a lot of training on breath work with people. Do you find there's a shift in consciousness towards alternative in America? Because there is an umbrella of you actually talked about the subconscious programming from child. So talk about the subconscious program that people maybe don't know that they already have that's set in place to create that belief system that alternative maybe is not the best way. That's a powerful conversation.
We are essentially, and I can only speak for the US because this is
Yeah,
where I am, but we are essentially trained from birth, conditioned from birth to conform to the medical system.
yeah,
And especially now, we have these well baby visits that you are constantly bringing your child to the doctor regularly from 0 to the age of 18. So by the time you're an adult, you are essentially taught on a health standpoint that the power to heal is outside of you. And so we become conditioned to believe that. And I think a lot of us, and this is not to say that there aren't some amazing doctors out there. There are incredible doctors out there. I'm more referring to the system, that I believe the system trains us for a reason. And so a lot of us adhere to it because, again, we are conditioned. This is subconscious mind programming. And we'll start taking the pills, the pharmaceuticals, whatever. And then we start to not feel as well. And I'm speaking from my own experience. There were times I was sick and I would just take a pill and want to feel better. And a lot of times I wouldn't, and I would have side effects and I would feel horrible. So I also had instances where the medical system completely failed me. And I said, no, I'm not doing that anymore because it nearly killed me twice. So I said, okay, Matt, there's got to be another way. There has to be something else. So that was for me, and I think that's what happens or is happening to so many people is they're recognizing these things are not helping. And we're also trained to believe in the quick fix, right? Take a pill and you're better. So healing holistically can take time. The condition didn't develop overnight, so to heal overnight is, I believe, a little unrealistic. So when we recognize, okay, healing is a journey, and you get to the root cause, because the medical system is not trained to get to the root cause. It's trained to give you a band-aid or something to treat a condition. So when we really get to the root cause and we really find what is there, there's something much deeper that they're not taught in the medical community of how to treat.
yeah. I actually, well, and thank you for sharing that because it is always, and especially when we're doing podcasts and things like that, there's always perceptions and opinions, and that doesn't mean to say that everybody else has to believe in those opinions, but they are very valid and real for you, Chris, and that's an important part. I actually would commend the United Kingdom at the moment, to be fair. And I did a podcast with the doctor, and they said, look, we have literally 7 minutes, 5 minutes to sit and diagnose. And they were like, we are trying everything we can to not give a pill. The pill's the last thing that we want to give people these days if we can manage it differently. And for some people, that causes uproar because like, oh no, I want a pill. So okay, that's fine. They get the pill. Then the ones that maybe don't. So I would have to commend the UK medical on that. To be fair, what and an underlying an undercurrent to what we're talking about, especially with the subconscious programming from childhood. Go and see him. It breeds fear, doesn't it? It breeds fear, and fear has a very potent outcome for us growing up. How would you encourage, or how would you see that there's options to bypass the fear? Not necessarily bypass, probably not the best word using there, but how to look round the fear, knowing that once, I think we all come from a place a lot these days that's you've got to feel it to heal it. How can we help people to embrace the alternative and decrease the fear?
That's such a great question. I feel that it really is going to come down to the individual, right? We all have a journey. So, and as you said, about how the UK with the doctors, how, they just have like their 5 to 7 minutes and, that they have to see patient. We do have that too. And I think there are so many doctors that are trying so hard. And it's a beautiful thing when we could really come together on how to heal instead of a scare tactic on if you don't do this, you could die. Those kinds of things, because um, dive into that. We're all going to die one day. What is really the fear, right? Like there's not necessarily the fear of death. It's the fear of what you may be missing out on, who you're leaving behind, those kinds of things. So really, in order to work with fear, it's facing it as best as you can. Can you hold hands with that fear? It does not mean it necessarily is going to go away, but when you can put faith over fear, I have faith in myself. I have faith in the ability to do this. I will walk with my fear as best as possible. But when we're able to do that, I feel we make so much more progress in our own lives in any situation. It doesn't even have to be from a health condition, but when we have fear, it can create limitations. But when we can put that faith over fear, of that faith in the unknown, faith in our ability to figure it out, or that, the universe will help us along the way, or people will help us along the way, we really help ourselves progress and recognize that a lot of the limitations that were there are ones we put there in our own minds. And we get beyond that. We're like, oh, this wasn't so bad. Or, oh, that was crazy, but I'm glad I did it.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a powerful conversation had there. I think you're absolutely right. So, who do you? And I think it's always powerful. How do people find you, Chris? I know you're in Southern California. I know you get to do on podcasts and things like that. But locally around, did you say San Diego? It was San Diego, right?
Yes, I'm
I
in
said
San
San
Diego.
Diego Chargers. How do people know about Chris?
Most people find me online. So my website is my name, chriswasko.com. So that's probably the easiest. But most of my clients I actually work with online. I'm only actually in San Diego for about 2.5 years now. So while I have some clients visit me here, it is not as much as I have on my online community. I'm on Facebook, and I do a lot of podcasts. So that does help as well.
And who was so recently? How did you get to help somebody? What was it that you were so fine tuned into? You helped someone have that revelation.
I've been really blessed with some amazing clients lately. I really help them see themselves. And I don't feel I do this amazing work, but I have them make me feel otherwise. I have people send me the most beautiful emails of how I changed their lives. And that just feels like such a big thing to say. But it's really, like I said, I really just help them see themselves. I help them understand things that have happened to them in life, kind of put a different light on it. Uh, and also just help them heal the trauma, because when their nervous system starts to calm, then they themselves see their situations differently and start to move forward differently. Their energy literally changes.
And I know we talked about chakras and healing, and I know that you work with the chakras. Is there genuinely a chakra that is the one that needs to really? Is there a chakra you focus on? Let's talk chakras. Actually, let's talk for anyone that's like, Cuddy, what's a chakra? Let's talk about the energies through the body. And correct me if I'm wrong. Five, six, seven chakras.
Seven.
Seven.
Seven main ones,
The
yes.
seven main chakras. Now, I actually stumbled upon chakras through, to be fair, through acupuncture. To be fair,
Hmm.
it was acupuncture that started learning it. I did have acupuncture, and I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. Generally, my sciatica went away, and I was like, I now I understand the energy channels that we have and how we can unblock them. Do you find there's a certain chakra that most people, or explain the chakras to people first of all?
Yeah, so working from the bottom up, you have your root. That's very much about keeps you grounded, your sacral, solar plexus, heart, throat, third eye, and your crown. And those are the ones we generally work with. Those are the ones I work with when doing energy healing. So when I am reading someone's chakras, what I do is I connect my energy to theirs, and it allows me to essentially step into their energy. So I will do a read where I am stepping into each chakra and I ask for it to reveal what we need to know. And I wouldn't say there's a one that's always consistent, right? It will really vary by client, but I can say anyone that is blocked or has some sort of trauma in it always will relate to the experience that they've dealt with. So I'll go in, I'll find the chakras, and I'm always. I know I work with a lot of trauma, but I also try to, when I'm looking, I'm not just looking for the negative. I'm also looking for the positive. So, like when I see someone, like with a really open solar plexus, I'm like, wow, this person's really intuitive. I get excited about that. When someone has a really good heart chakra, like, oh, wow, this person's a great friend. This person's a great parent. I look for those things too. Because I like to share those things with people to let them know this is what their energy reveals, that I don't know them. I literally just met them. So I really know nothing about them. And I'm able to tell them something about themselves that you can't Google, right? So I like to do that for them. And I would say, uh, if I had to say that one popped up, I would probably the solar plexus because that is the one of our personal power. And because I work with so many people that deal with trauma, we are often very disconnected from our personal power when we have been traumatized, and it can block it.
Okay. Remind me the solar plexus. I know there's the crown, the mind's eye, the throat, the heart. It is
Solar plexus.
it
Yeah.
is, yeah, the chest. That's
Yeah, just that like just below your chest cavity there.
sacral's the stomach, and the root is the base that where we see the
Yeah.
ass. I'll just say I'm gonna cheapen the root chakra by saying the ass.
There you go. It works. It's
Yeah. And
it's
then you
good
know
to put
there'll be a lot
it.
of people, if they know me, they'll be like, oh my God, I just couldn't know about all the chakras. Actually, I've got a meditation course that I go all the way through the chakras and I go through it all and explain why and where and everything. So strangely enough, so you don't know me because I'm 6'2", I am 4 feet wide, I'm extremely burly. I have a very juvenile haircut for a 47-year-old. But if I'm not smiling, I look like a thug and a scowl. And I would say, what's one of your bigger American football players? Not the wide receiver because they're runners, so they're runners, and I'm not a runner. I would be a blocker. So I have
Yeah,
the
yeah.
a lot of people are generally surprised. Oh, you really do understand spirituality and alternative. I'm like, absolutely. I had to go through it myself, and I had to go through that. And I think fear is the biggest driver, is the fear of known. And when you have that faith, you absolutely tapped into that there, is when you've gone through traumatic experience, and you talked about the subconscious programming from your parents, and you had to leave your parents for the reason you did, that was your tipping point. Because you've had, if you look at it from the broader picture, you've gone through fear, 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 different kinds of fear because you've gone from trauma with the parents into leaving that, taking your power back, fantastic, wow, to suddenly feeling your granddad, which for anybody would be, am I going crazy? You absolutely mentioned that, am I going crazy? Which then takes you back to fear. What was the point that you allowed faith to allow you to conquer that?
I really just was trusting my intuition. My strongest chakra is my solar plexus, and I really felt it going through it. So, like, when you talk about gut feelings and those feelings, like as I took those steps, and the steps were small, right? And I believe smaller steps to healing really make great strides over time. You just don't feel it when you're going through it because you're just so in it. And for me, I kept feeling really good about my choices, even if they didn't make sense. And sometimes they made no sense, but I felt good about it. It felt right. And I guess I just kept trusting that. And then things would just happen where, I would start hearing children's inner monologue, and I would be able to share it with their parents of, the parents would say, "Oh, my child, this, and that." And I was like, no, it's not actually how he feels. And I would be able to share that, not to strangers, of course. So I would, it started out with just doing this with friends, and they started encouraging me, you should do this. You should, work with people. And I, of course, at first was just kind of like, yeah, no, it's okay. And then they would just start referring people to me, oh, you should talk to Chris. Chris will know what this is. Chris will know how to help. So I think it took a lot of encouragement from others at first. Uh, and just like I said, it really just felt good. I felt so good helping people. I felt so good helping bring clarity to situations that didn't have any clarity. And especially in a parent-child relationship. So, because that's a personal wound of my own, to help a parent understand their child and not make assumptions about that child just felt like a beautiful thing. So really, as I was helping others, I was healing myself.
Fantastic. I suppose it's the energy wheel of help, and it resources the energy for yourself and things like that. So, Chris, you've never met me before. I'm not going to put you on the spot yet, but it's coming. I would like to ask a really powerful question for, and I've forgotten where I was going with this, but it was to align towards what would, oh, that was it. What would be your special gift that you're tuned into? Because I know that the previous psychic I spoke to, she said she didn't see things. There was no visualizations for her. It was all sound and feeling, which is completely different. So what would be your area of expertise for your clairvoyancy? Which aspect is it? Is it sight, sound, touch? Which one is it for you?
I can do all of it, but my strongest is feel.
Right.
So
Perfect.
if, for example, someone will sit before me and I will feel so many things about them. That I had an experience recently where I was at a show, and I was speaking about my work. And then afterwards, people could come talk to me. And this man came, he sat down at my table, and I just felt his energy. And I looked at him and I said, "You're a healer." And he's just like, but he stopped doing the work because he said it was just becoming too much. He was taking on too much of other people's energy. And I just said to him, I said, "You're not done." And I said, "But it's great you're taking a break." And he took a moment and he closed his eyes and he's like, "Thank you for saying this. I think I needed to hear this." And it was such a beautiful moment because I wasn't there for readings, but his energy was so strong and so out there. Like, that's what happens, our auras touch. And, and this could happen to anybody. The example I like to use, if you're standing in line and someone stands right behind you and they're way too close and you feel that, even though you don't see it, that's because they're imposing on your auric space.
Yes.
Same with a close talker. Like, it's uncomfortable because they're in your field way too much.
Yeah. How do you fine tune your feel your feeling in the aurora now? And I'll ask because how often are you wrong with your feelings? If you don't mind my asking.
That's a great question. Well, I really have to think about that. I'm not usually wrong. But I also don't make incredibly specific predictions. A lot of
Yeah.
people often assume like, oh, you're psychic. You're going to make predictions about this, right? And it's just going to be like a foregone conclusion. But when I am shown things for somebody, I'm shown paths. And it's usually quite a few, depending on the person. So that means choice, that's free will. So our when we change our mind, it changes our path. When, we make whatever choices we're making for ourselves, we're given the gift of free will. That's the beautiful thing of being human. So how I guide people is I'll say, well, going this way, these are the kinds of things that come up, and going this way, this kind of things that come up. I will never tell somebody what to do. That's not my job. I will never get in the way of free will, but I don't tell somebody this is exactly how it is. And energy is not always easy to explain. So I will get feelings, and I do my best to explain the feelings that are coming across. And like I said, it's just not always easy to explain energy. So I like to use examples. Gosh, I'll use so many examples. I'll be like, it feels like this, kind of like when you're experiencing this, and I'll just come up with some examples. So it's really as long as they feel aligned to it. But like I say, I don't tell people what to do. I don't ever want to take someone's power away. I want to give them the ability to heal. I can usually tell the kind of person that is there for a single session and kind of wants that magic of, make me better. And I know that those kind of people, they're going to walk away and that think like, oh, this didn't work. So I've had that happen a couple times.
Yeah.
So they've proven me right. And then,
So I'm still
you
right.
know, uh,
Right.
yeah, I mean, but I also like I really try not to have ego in it too. I feel like when I was first doing this and when I was first doing this work before really working but training, so I was taking a lot of psychic mediumship courses. So what was happening is I would do these mediumship reads on people and they would be spot on. And I was so excited and I would get really excited. And, but to the point of arrogance, like, wow, I'm really good at this. And wow, I started later in life. Look, I am great. And then my
Yeah.
next read would be awful. I
Yeah.
would completely miss it. And I'd be like, okay, so I feel like when you do this work, it's so incredibly important to be humble because as soon as you're not, spirit really puts you in check. Like, oh yeah, you think you're hot stuff? Guess what? Try that next read.
It
And
was
then all of
never
a
you in
sudden
the
you're
first
blocked
place.
and you're
It was
like, I can't
me.
see
It
this
was never
person.
you. It was me.
Exactly. Exactly. So I think it's important for us to look at ourselves as like a vessel. We're here to pass on messages. Hence, you're a medium. You are serving as this communicator. So I really, like I said, I really try not to have ego in it. This isn't to say that I don't feel I'm good at what I do. I do, but I'm so grateful for it. I soak myself in gratefulness because when I am able to help somebody, it feels so good. When I do an incredible read, sometimes I do a read and I impress myself. Like, wow, that was really good. Where did that come from? But I always thank spirit. Like anytime I close out a session, I I always do my closeout. Thank you very much. Thank you for helping me help them. And thank you for allowing me to be a channel.
Yeah, perfect. Just stop there for a second. I'm going to pause. Thank you. I know we just had a little glitch in the podcast there. So as I paused it, we went into the conversation. I think you've got a spirit coming through. I think because it was just going pixelated there. So we've never met, Chris, and this is not to put you on the spot. But could you, even though we're miles apart, I know I always bound in like Tigger to a party. I really do. And I know. And do you know what? Now looking back, there was a wave because I do bound in, and you were like, "Oh, hello, Cuddy, pleased to meet you." Yeah. So, can we do an aura reading or an energy reading live?
Sure, we certainly
Perfect.
can.
Perfect. How do we start, Chris?
So just make sure your feet are comfortably on the ground. So try not to cross your legs
Perfect. Oh,
and just, set into yourself. Just feel yourself comfortable. Take deep breaths if you feel connected to it, or just breathe naturally. And I'm just going to connect to your energy. So what I do is I start, I'll make this a little abbreviated. These can get long, but I start down at the root, just to see if you're well grounded. And while you are, I would say that's one I'd want to work on. So there's something that's but this feels more recent. So like when I feel someone that's a little off ground, there's just something that's gone on recently to kind of make them feel a little off. And it's not always a bad thing. You could be really busy. You could kind of be a lot of moving around. So that's just something that comes up for you. But this is not, like I said, a deeper thing. A deeper thing I'd feel where I just can't put you into a grounding state. So, your sacral is really good. You got a lot of strong sacral energy. Um, I'd be surprised if you have a stronger chakra than this. This one is like bold and bright. Let's go up to your solar plexus. I could tell you're someone that works with chakras because it's just very easy to get in. Solar plexus. So yeah, I like your solar plexus chakra. So what your solar plexus shows me, what already a lot you can see in yourself. You have a very vibrant energy, right? There are elements in this chakra, that do have your self-doubt. And I hear a lot of inner monologue in here. So it hears it very clearly. You probably talk to yourself quite a bit. And it's interesting because
that
it's
does very
in,
good sense.
but it's in, like, I could literally hear it in this chakra. Usually the inner monologues I'll hear in the throat, but it's in here. So you are really, you're like you really psych yourself up a lot in a good way. Like, okay, we're doing this, doing that, da, da, da. And then when you have that stuff come in that says, no, you're not, you're just like, we're going to have words. So there's a lot of fun going on in your solar plexus there. So the that one I would work on in terms of just some energy healing, just to help strengthen what's already really strong in there, because this inner aspect of like this inner monologue, there can be some conflict going on in this. But again, this is not bad. This is very much just who you are. You've probably been doing this your whole life. So it's not something I would say change. It's just more of like, let's work with this to just strengthen the energy. Your heart, um, got big heart. But I wouldn't cross you. I wouldn't have guessed this one. Um, you have a really good memory for those that have hurt you in this chakra. So you've done a really good job of working through forgiveness. So I don't feel um, I'll get like kind of remnants of hurt in this chakra. So, um, I only have one person that I'd want to climb into more. Um, this is a male that this is where some hurt is tied in this chakra. So I won't dive into this more because this feels a little personal. But but you've got a really good heart. You've really good with people. You're also really good with bringing people together. But this all comes from this part of you. A lot of people will say it's your heart space, which can be said, but you are a good gatherer. But I do feel like the ambivert nature of outgoing and yet like your time alone. So you'll do really well with people that you gel with, and then not so much with the ones that don't align. I shouldn't say align so much as just, you like your people. You like energy, matching energy, which so many of us do. Shifting up to your throat. Your throat, honestly, because we're doing this right now, is just going to be wide open. So, reading this, you know, you're speaking, you're doing this work, you're really good, and I get all the propulsion. So if we weren't doing an interview, it might look a little different, just because this one's so incredibly active at the moment. So I'm just gonna kind of put that as um, so good at using your voice, but I do get a little of like not always. So it feels like I got some like stuff in the past that you wouldn't have been so great at that and wouldn't have been so aligned to that. But that could come up at times, but it's again, we're so in this active throat chakra. So I'm just gonna put that. And then third eye. Your third eye is wide open, so you're very connected to um yeah, I mean, you are connected to clairvoyance. I don't feel it as your primary clair though. A lot of people assume like if your third eye is open, then you're seeing everything in spirit. That's not always the case, but it does show you're very connected, and you're very intuitive. So you have really strong intuition, um, and you can see people because as I use your third eye, like I see people very clearly. So you can really see people and understand people. And but you might get a little frustrated if someone kind of pulls one over on you because you're like, how did I not see that? Because that's a little challenging for people to do that to you. So yeah, it's hard for someone to pull one over on you. Also not always the case though. So yeah, always layers to energy. And then your crown, of course, that would be open too. Um, so your crown is exploratory, which a lot of us are. So you're always asking questions, you're always exploring, you're very open. I don't feel like you aligning to just one belief system. You're open to many. It's like you're expansive. So, yeah, yeah. So, and really, if I'm doing this read and you're my client, like we're going into the stuff. Okay, here's the things and the steps of, going beyond this. So, like I would say, like for your crown, like you keep exploring because there's a lot more coming for you. You are barely scratching the surface on your exploration.
That is scary in a good way. In a good way. Because I totally agree. Absolutely. I'm exploring Anunnaki at this moment in time. So I've said that in the past three podcasts. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Exploring. There's far too much we don't know. I think
yeah,
alternatives should be called normal, to be fair. But
I
no,
agree.
I don't know where you are on the reading, but you could not have, didn't even feel like it was cold reading. You nailed every part of it. So not even yeah. Trace, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate the feedback.
Yeah. It was the spirits on the video. It absolutely was the spirits on the video because your Wi-Fi has gone back to normal. Absolutely. Yep, your Wi-Fi's gone back to normal. Yep. It was just strange. I could hear an audio, but I could not I couldn't see you.
Interesting.
Wow, right?
Interesting. But it
Uh,
also says a lot about you. The more open somebody is, the easier they are to read. So, and this doesn't mean that people shouldn't be skeptical. I love a skeptic. It's more when we're cynical, we close ourselves off. Uh,
what's the difference then? Tell me what's the difference between cynical and skeptical?
well, skeptical is more of, yeah, I'm not so sure about this. Cynical is, you can't do this.
So yeah, yeah, that perfect. You that yeah. So cynical is nah, walloper as we would say in Scotland. Yeah, like that. Perfect. Thank you. Well done. Yeah, good. That's fantastic. Wow, that's amazing. Genuinely. Um. So when you were doing the reading, the and you might be able to explain this for me.
Mhm.
I have what I would like to say as I struggle with deciphering judgment to intuition, judgment, intuition, opinion. Because I think it's intuition, I don't think it's judgment. But something within me is like, am I judging something here? And when I get a bee in my bonnet, as we say in the UK, I can't let it go. I'm like, I told you about that person 12 months ago. I've made everybody aware about something 12 months ago. And 12 months later, like, really should have listened to Cuddy 12. I see it's not about listening, it's about understanding what I know, I found that fascinating. I found that part fascinating of you were absolutely right. I've been very open in the past with if you do me wrong, there's a hell of a lot of force behind that you need to understand. If you do wrong, there is a part of me that will just I'm a big believer. I think I talked about this in a video. Is we use the pain for fuel, not we use pain to empower, not to hurt. If we again, it's do we become the superhero or do we become the villain in the story?
Yeah.
It's like Superman's got his pain, but he uses it to help the world, whereas the Joker uses his pain to hurt people. It's how do we use that pain to fuel or to hurt? And it'll always be fuel. It'll always be fuel for me. Chris, I can honestly say I'm not cynical or what was the other word?
Skeptical.
I'm not skeptical, definitely not skeptical. Cynical, I'm fully aware of cold reading and things like that. There was not one part that was cold reading. Honestly, I can trip. We'll talk about feelings, and I always say a lot of the times feelings are not facts. We can feel not good enough, and we can feel not worthy. So feelings are not always facts. But that was something else. That, Chris, was something else, and it wasn't planned. For anyone watching the podcast, they'll be like, "No, it was
Oh,
not."
I didn't know that was coming because usually I prep for those.
You know what? It's because I did something about a few days ago with another person, and that was also a really lovely experience. And I thought let's do it. And we look for anyone watching this podcast. We met 5 minutes before the podcast. I get guests on so we can talk. There's a 5 minute prep for the podcast. These podcasts are open, and we see where the conversation goes. There might be trigger aspects for people, and that's the power of the podcast. Is we allow each other to go, and you allow me to ask some questions. You were like, oh shit, I wasn't expecting that question. I'm, as I do with my clients, I'm very good at asking questions that dig. I'm a digger because I'm like, if we can dig the root out, honestly, the anxiety goes away. Let me dig, let me pull the root out, and the pain goes away. But we have to dig, and the digging hurts. Chris, is there anything else you want to say? Because I think we really did wrap up perfectly there.
Yeah, and well, if you want, as far as because you started to ask about, really your own intuition versus judgment and opinion.
Yes.
And I'm happy to touch on that because really your first instinct that is your intuition, right? So about a feeling you have about someone like this person is not good for that person, right? And maybe you tell that person and that's where then maybe judgment and opinions come in because the first one is intuition. The second one is then, why are you doing this? Why are you with this person? That's where the judgment comes in. And then this person's not good for you. That's opinions on top of your intuition, right? So I think for me, it took some time with that because while I could read it, sometimes people have to walk that path. We're not always meant to prevent people from learning those things. So it is not for us to have an opinion, it's not for us to judge. But it could be really challenging if the person is going through something difficult and we feel like, gosh, if you just listen, you could spare yourself of this. But they also have to learn it. So who's to say that they're not just going to find someone else along the path that's going to be just like that person and maybe worse. So it's challenging, I feel, when we are very in tune and very aware, but really it's more important that we're in tune and aware for ourselves And for others, when they're open to it and they want it, when they ask for it, and when they don't, they just don't. A lot of people are really curious about my opinions and what I have to say on things because they know that I tend to have insight. But I also will say, like, while I have these feelings, I also feel you're going to just go right and do it. And they're like, you're absolutely right.
So how I have a feeling I'm going to go a little bit deeper on this one after
Go
the
for
podcast
it.
because I'm now looking back at about five, 6 instances in life where I did 100% predict something.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, you know, because we always say we should have stuck with our gut feelings. How can I tune that into more so it becomes natural, it becomes not a judgment, it becomes, I'm just not going to go that way because for this.
It's really subtle. I mean, I feel like it's really tapping into the subtlety of it and not overthinking it. We as humans get in our own way all the time by overthinking. So as soon as we get to this overthinking and questioning, we are starting to disconnect from ourselves. It's literally pulling our energy away. So the more still we can be with it, and stillness is really just quiet. It's stillness of thought, stillness of mind, stillness of mouth, right? And you just sit with it and you'll get a feel. You already have had the times you're like, I knew and I was spot on. But oftentimes, and this is anyone that's intuitive, once we start stepping out of ourselves, we get away from that intuition.
Mm, yeah. Because judgment's been the one, I always say this, judgment's been the one that's been the biggest downfall of many of my it was always judgment. It was always judgment. And it's how do I decipher between intuition and judgment and that understanding? I'm going to work on that because I love that. I love that, Chris. That was a really powerful look. This was powerful, Chris. I think this was absolutely fantastic. Not the way we expected it to go in
Nope,
any way whatsoever.
not at all.
I normally come away from a podcast with this is the title. And I haven't got one for this one. So I don't know if this was more for me than an actual podcast, to be fair.
I
Um,
love it.
yeah. So I'll write. I'm going to say thank you. Um, Chris, I think if there was ever your calmness and rationale about who you are, and what you do speaks bounds.
Thank you.
And that's very evident.
I really appreciate you saying that. It feels I take that into my heart.
Yeah. There was when we're going through, and we always speak about ego, and I've talked about ego as well. And we when we make these revelations with people, and I remember somebody a while back saying, it wasn't you that made a revelation, it was that person that came to you. You just asked the right question. I'm like, you're absolutely right. But it's that scary feeling of, oh my God, I have that power to be able to
Yeah.
change somebody else's life. Again, superhero, right? So we know that superhero pops up. So I tell people, so I have to tell people, look, I was working with a client and we did this. And they're like, oh my God. I'm like, no, it actually wasn't, because the person still had to go through the trauma. They still had to go all through that. They were just ready that I was the person they felt comfortable enough to talk about it, and I could help reformat the subconscious mind, if you like. And that's what does keep us humble. And I think humble and lack of judgment is something I'll always work on, and definitely try and manage that intuition more. Chris, stay right there, because we're gonna have another chat. Thank you so much. I think if there was ever a case of if it's in the mind, it can be managed. I think we've proven that alternative should be the new normal, if anything. And there'll be more to come from if it's in the mind, it can be managed with a Mind Management Mentors podcast. I'm a big believer in people meeting at the right time. And we did, Chris. We certainly did. Big love from Cuddy, as I always say. And for anybody that knows me and watches this podcast, and everything you said in that reading, they will be having a fit right now for how close you were to everything.
Wow.
You
I
have
love
no
that.
idea. You have
Thank
no
you.
idea. And I didn't try to nod and give you any clues. If it's in the mind, it can be managed. Big love from Cuddy, and I will see you on the next episode of the Mind Management Mentors podcast.